You ever wake up to police lights bouncing off your bedroom walls at 4 in the morning because a woman named Karen called 911 claiming your parked Jeep was committing a crime? No? Just me? Great, then buckle up, because this ride gets worse before it gets hilarious. 1 minute I'm in Pikachu pajamas, drooling on my pillow, and the next I'm barefoot on my front lawn trying to explain to two very confused officers why a furious middle-aged lady is demanding they tow my car from my own driveway. It all started like any normal Thursday. I got home from work, tired, hungry, and done with the world. My Jeep Wrangler, midnight black, lifted, freshly detailed, was parked where it always was, in the driveway of the house I've owned for 6 years. It's my pride and joy. I've put more money into that vehicle than I want to admit in therapy. I walked inside, nuked some leftovers, played one match of Warzone too many, and crashed by midnight. I had no idea that 3 doors down, Karen was plotting suburban warfare because she had a house full of guests and apparently not enough concrete to go around. Karen was one of those HOA types who believed she was the queen of the cul-de-sac. Blonde helmet haircut, floral robe that hadn't been updated since 1998, and a voice like a leaf blower stuck in reverse. She'd scowled at my Jeep before, something about it being too aggressive for the neighborhood aesthetic. I thought she was just bored. Turns out, she was waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. That moment arrived at 4:07 a.m. when she marched to my front door in bedroom slippers, furious that her niece's fiancé's cousin couldn't find a parking spot at her sleepover soiree. Now, you'd think a sane person would knock once, maybe ring the bell, and try to talk it out. Not Karen. Oh no. She hammered the door like she was collecting taxes. I stumbled down the stairs half asleep, opened the door, and got hit with a verbal hurricane. Move. Your Jeep, she screeched, stabbing a finger toward my driveway like it owed her money. My guests can't park and I'm hosting a professional this morning. It took me a solid 10 seconds to even register what was happening. I rubbed my eyes and blinked. Karen, it's 4 in the morning. I don't care. I have important people over. Move it now or I'll have it towed. At that moment, I laughed. That wasn't the reaction she expected. I didn't mean to be disrespectful, but the idea of moving my legally parked Jeep so that a bunch of half-drunk wedding guests could line up in front of my house like it was a strip mall just seemed insane. I'm not moving it, Karen, I said, and began to close the door. She yelled, Fine. I'm calling 911. That got me to pause, because surely she wasn't serious. I peeked through the blinds just in time to watch her dial. She was serious. She was on the phone, animated, pacing on my lawn like a courtroom prosecutor rehearsing for trial. Yes, officer, it's an emergency. There's a vehicle blocking access. Yes, it's in his own driveway, but he's being unreasonable and refusing to cooperate with neighborhood policy. Neighborhood policy. What is this, the Geneva Convention? 15 minutes later, the unmistakable red and blue glow danced across my windows. 2 officers stepped out of their cruiser looking like they expected to find a domestic dispute. Instead, they found me, still in Pikachu pajama pants, holding a cup of instant coffee, explaining that yes, the vehicle was mine, yes, the driveway was mine, and no, I wasn't hallucinating, this was actually happening. Karen met them halfway with printed HOA newsletters and a spiral-bound binder of imagined rules. I stood there trying not to laugh as she presented Exhibit A, photographic evidence of the Jeep, which was literally a snapshot she took at 3:58 a.m. from her bedroom window. The cops gave each other that look. You know the one. The one that says this is gonna make the group chat later. To their credit, the officers were calm and professional. They confirmed that I wasn't breaking any laws, thanked me for my cooperation, and politely suggested that Karen take up her grievances with the HOA, not emergency services. Karen huffed, crossed her arms like she was about to combust, and muttered something about neighborhood decay. I waved the officers goodbye and watched Karen stomp back to her house in full drama queen mode. But before she disappeared inside, she turned around and pointed at me like a movie villain promising a sequel. You'll regret this, she said. Honestly, that should have been the end of it. but I underestimated just how far Karen was willing to go to wage war over 4 feet of cement. I figured she was just mad, maybe embarrassed. I figured wrong. By 9 a.m. that morning, she'd already sent an HOA complaint, posted in the community Facebook group calling me hostile to neighborhood harmony, and filed a request to discuss ongoing violations of property standards at the next HOA board meeting. I hadn't even brushed my teeth yet, and I was already on a digital wanted poster. I poured myself another cup of coffee and walked outside to check on my Jeep, half expecting to find it egged or sticker-bombed. Instead, I found a crisp white envelope under the windshield wiper. Inside was a typed letter on HOA letterhead. It wasn't signed, but I could smell the perfume and ego from a mile away. Dear homeowner, as a reminder, your vehicle must be aligned with community parking regulations. Continued disregard for shared neighborly responsibility will result in board-level action. It was official now. The war had begun. And I don't mean the kind fought with weapons, I mean the kind fought with signs, bylaws, screenshots, and snarky lawn decorations. I should have known this wouldn't be a one-night drama. With Karen, it was never just one night. It was a series. A saga. A suburban epic. And all of it, over a Jeep parked in the only place it legally belonged. The next morning began with the sound of my neighbor Ted laughing from across the street. I stepped out onto my porch, coffee in hand, wearing the same Pikachu pajama pants that had seen the madness of the night before, and saw him pointing at my driveway. There, taped to the hood of my Jeep with blue painter's tape, classy touch, was another letter. This one wasn't printed. It was handwritten in Karen's chicken scratch, underlined twice and surrounded by little angry arrows. Final warning: you are in violation of community expectations. Your refusal to act with civility is being documented. Parking privileges may be reviewed. Parking privileges. On my own property. I didn't know whether to laugh or punch a lawn gnome. This woman wasn't just obsessed, she was spiraling. I peeled off the note, waved to Ted, who yelled "Need backup," and walked back inside already planning my next move. I'd grown up with 3 brothers. I knew the art of petty retaliation. Karen wanted drama? I had enough petty stored up to write a sitcom. That same afternoon, I drove to the hardware store and bought the most obnoxiously large wooden board I could legally fit in my Jeep. I sanded it, painted it bright white, and in bold red letters wrote a message so clear even Karen's wine-soaked guests couldn't miss it: private driveway, not for Karen's guests. Below it, I added in black paint, "You block it, I box you in." I hammered it into my front yard, right next to the driveway, and admired it like an artist stepping back from a masterpiece. Within minutes, it had its first visitor. Karen stormed down the sidewalk like a heat-seeking missile, mouth already in motion before she even stepped onto my grass. "You can't put that there," she barked. "Pretty sure I can," I replied, sipping my iced tea. "Private property, remember. It's a visual disturbance. It lowers neighborhood value. The HOA will hear about this." I shrugged. Maybe they should hear about someone calling the cops on a parked car. Seems like a real neighborhood value issue. Karen huffed so hard I thought she'd blow over a lawn flamingo. She stormed off again, and I swear I could hear her dialing numbers before she even made it past my mailbox. The sign stayed. The Jeep stayed. And most importantly, the simmering fury on her face stayed every time she passed my house. The real chaos began the next morning. I went out to grab my mail and found flyers stuffed into every mailbox on the block. The title, printed in bold Comic Sans, read "How ONE Neighbor is Destroying Our Peace." It included a photo of my Jeep, a picture of my sign, and a hilariously dramatic paragraph claiming I was antagonizing community values with aggressive signage, vehicle hoarding, and inflammatory behavior. She made me sound like I was staging a coup with a four-wheel drive battering ram. Rhonda, the retired school teacher across the street, walked up holding one of the flyers, trying to keep a straight face. "You see this mess?" she asked. "Oh, I saw. I think I'm the villain now." "Congratulations," she said. "You've made it. Karen only targets people she's afraid of. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I caught Karen pacing in front of her house again. She looked back at my sign, took a few photos with her phone, and disappeared inside. 2 hours later, she struck back with her own masterpiece. Right on the strip of grass between the sidewalk and street in front of my house, she planted a thin, laminated board that read "Neighborhood Safety First, Report Reckless Parking." Below that was a cartoon Jeep, crossed out with a red circle. It was like watching two kids wage war with crayon drawings, only now the neighborhood was the battlefield. And unlike most kids, we both had printers, stakes, and passive-aggressive fury burning like nuclear fuel. For the next few days, the lawn sign drama escalated into a cold war of petty proportions. I added solar-powered lights to illuminate mine at night. She spray-painted hers neon yellow. I added a QR code that linked to a video of her calling 911 at 4 a.m. She taped over it with duct tape. I replaced the tape with a sticker that read "Censorship is un-American." But it wasn't just sign wars anymore. Things got digital. Karen started posting in the HOA Facebook group daily. Her posts read like manifestos, always using all caps in at least one sentence. "We cannot allow disorder to spread," she wrote, "or our children will suffer the consequences." Someone replied with a GIF of popcorn and got banned. I tried staying out of it, but it was hard when people from other blocks started slow driving past my house, pointing at the signs like they were tourist attractions. One guy even knocked on my door and asked if he could take a selfie with the Jeep. I figured at this point, if I was going to be infamous, I might as well embrace it. That weekend, I threw what I called a driveway dedication ceremony. Just a few neighbors, some burgers on the grill, music, and a string of Christmas lights hanging from the Jeep's roll cage. I set up lawn chairs pointed toward Karen's house, not as a threat but as art. Performance art. Symbolic peace through presence. The guests were chill. Rhonda brought deviled eggs. My buddy Mark made t-shirts that said "Free the Driveway." We all wore them. Karen called the police again. This time, she claimed the music violated noise ordinances. The officer, same guy from before, rolled up, heard the faint sounds of Fleetwood Mac, and visibly sighed. He asked me to turn it down slightly, told us to have a nice night, and left before Karen could waddle over with her binder. But that night, as I cleaned up, something clicked. She wasn't just mad about the Jeep. This went deeper. Her obsession wasn't random. People don't get this irrational over one vehicle. I remembered something Rhonda had said, about Karen only targeting people she feared. So I started digging. I pulled out old HOA newsletters, attendance records, meeting notes, public listings. What I found was odd. Karen had been appointed to the HOA board 2 years ago when someone named Doug moved out. But there were no actual election results. No vote records. Nothing in the newsletter announcing it. It was as if she just inserted herself. That wasn't just sketchy. That might be illegal. I was onto something, and I knew it. I didn't know how deep the rabbit hole went, but I was already halfway down. What started as a ridiculous argument over a Jeep had now twisted into a full-blown HOA mystery. Karen had declared war over 4 tires and a strip of cement. She thought she was fighting a nuisance. She didn't realize she'd just provoked someone who was way too stubborn to back down, and now I had a mission. I wasn't just keeping my Jeep in place anymore. I was keeping the truth parked right on her front lawn. By the start of the next week, the temperature in the neighborhood wasn't measured in degrees, it was measured in tension. Every glance, every walk to the mailbox, every trash can dragged to the curb had the undertone of a cold war that was only heating up. Karen had stopped acknowledging my existence with words. Now, it was all glares and muttered threats under her breath, like she was casting driveway-related curses as she passed by. But I wasn't letting it go. Not because I needed revenge, but because I knew I was right, and the deeper I looked, the more I realized something in this HOA reeked of cover-ups and control. It started with a conversation at the dog park. Rhonda's schnauzer had managed to break off his leash and run straight into my leg. While I helped her gather his stuff, I casually brought up the HOA elections. "You ever vote for Karen?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant. Rhonda squinted like I'd asked her to solve a riddle. "Karen? Vote? I don't think we did. She just showed up one day with a clipboard." I pressed a bit more, and she mentioned that Doug, the previous board member, had moved out in a hurry, something about a falling out with Karen and a zoning disagreement over deck renovations. That raised flags. I went home and started pulling up HOA newsletters from the past few years. There was no mention of a formal appointment. No election notice. No announcement. It was like Doug vanished and Karen absorbed the power through osmosis. That night, I sent a few emails to the HOA management company, posing as a concerned homeowner requesting clarification about the board's composition and appointment processes. I also sent one directly to Karen, just to poke the bear, asking for documentation of her appointment and any minutes from the meeting where she was supposedly voted in. No response. But the very next morning, someone egged my mailbox. Not the house. Just the mailbox. And not random egging, 3 eggs, perfectly cracked, one on each side and one on top like a greasy little crown. That was the kind of detail Karen would pride herself on. Things got stranger when I spoke with Phil, the quiet accountant who lived at the end of the street. He kept to himself, but I'd seen him at every HOA meeting since I moved in. We chatted while waiting at the community mail kiosk, and I asked if he remembered any board vote involving Karen. Phil laughed under his breath. "Oh no, that was never a vote. She just started showing up to meetings with the HOA binder and saying she was on the board. Everyone was too tired or too busy to challenge it." It was all falling into place. Karen wasn't just a loudmouth with an ego. She was a suburban dictator who slipped through the cracks and built a little empire on silence and intimidation. I started documenting everything. Every flyer. Every sign. Every passive-aggressive message and threat. I started screen recording her posts in the HOA Facebook group, where she was now accusing me of escalating violence and sowing division because a neighbor's dog barked near her fence. She was unraveling. Then came the real kicker. I was browsing through HOA expense reports, because I'd requested access using the bylaws that she probably didn't think anyone would read, and I found a peculiar payment from the Neighborhood Improvement Fund. It was listed as Hospitality Reimbursement, Event Coordination. The amount was high. Suspiciously high. And the payee was someone with the same last name as Karen. That's when I remembered the 4 a.m. party. She had mentioned very important guests. I assumed it was just some family or out-of-town visitors. But this looked like she used HOA funds to wine and dine people for her own purposes. A bit more digging revealed that one of the attendees, confirmed through a blurry photo she'd proudly posted weeks ago, was a zoning inspector from the city council. Suddenly, the whole mess clicked together. Karen wasn't just power-tripping. She was trying to get approval for something. Maybe a renovation. Maybe a business license. Something that required city blessing, and she was schmoozing the officials under the radar. Probably even planning to turn her house into a bed and breakfast or an Airbnb empire right in the middle of our quiet neighborhood. That night, I was ready to go full detective. I printed every receipt, every screenshot, every post. I created a folder titled Karengate on my computer and a hard copy binder labeled Operation Jeep Justice. Because why not have a little fun with it? Then came the golden opportunity. Rhonda texted me with a simple message: secret HOA meeting. Tonight. 8 p.m. Karen's house. Bring popcorn. I didn't need to be told twice. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my folder, and made my way down the street. I didn't go in through the front. I slipped through the side, just like Rhonda said. She had cracked open her window, and I sat underneath with my phone out, recording every muffled word drifting through the glass. Inside, Karen was furious. She was ranting about my sign, my disruptive presence, and how I was ruining her plans. Then someone asked the question I'd been waiting for. A man's voice, nervous, asked, "So, about the hospitality reimbursement. Are we allowed to use those funds that way?" There was a pause. Then Karen's voice, sharp and defensive, "Don't question the process. The board approved it. It's done." Another voice piped up, "But we didn't vote. There wasn't a meeting." Karen snapped, "Do you want to be on the board? No? Then don't interfere." I stopped the recording. That was it. That was the moment she buried herself. The next day, I sent the audio to the HOA management company and attached every file I had. I also, with a slight sense of theatrical flair, dropped an envelope with copies of those same documents into the mailbox of every home in the neighborhood. By that evening, the community Facebook group was a bonfire. Comments poured in. Screenshots shared. Questions asked. Karen went silent. She didn't even come out to collect her mail. Her laminated sign outside my house disappeared overnight, replaced with nothing but an empty patch of grass and a slightly crooked stick. But the biggest surprise came when I received a formal email from the HOA. They were calling an emergency board meeting. All members invited. Public forum. Location: the community hall. Topic: review of board conduct and appointment legitimacy. Karen had gone too far, too fast, and underestimated the one thing she couldn't control: people paying attention. I sat back, Jeep safe in its driveway, sipping coffee and watching the sunset paint the street orange. It had started with a 4 a.m. knock and an outrageous demand. Now it was turning into a full-blown reckoning. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday at 6 p.m., but by 5:30 the parking lot was packed. People who hadn't shown their faces at a community gathering in years suddenly showed up in folding chairs and lawn gear like they were attending a concert. Rhonda brought brownies. Phil had a notepad. Even Ted, who normally only left his house for fishing trips and garbage day, brought a lawn chair and a tub of popcorn. The atmosphere was electric, not tense, but charged with a kind of quiet anticipation, like everyone knew something was about to go down and they weren't going to miss it for anything. I showed up with my binder under one arm and a GoPro clipped to the front of my shirt. Rhonda gave me a look that said, "You're ready," and I nodded like I was going to court. Karen arrived exactly 1 minute before the meeting started, wearing a navy blazer like she was about to give a TED talk on how to ruin a neighborhood. She walked straight to the front, lips tight, not looking left or right, and took her seat at the center table. 3 other board members followed her, but they didn't look nearly as confident. One of them, Marcia, kept adjusting her reading glasses every few seconds like she was trying to disappear behind them. The meeting opened with the usual droning script: call to order, attendance, approval of minutes, but nobody cared. Everyone was waiting for the real show, and it didn't take long. A hand shot up from the back of the room. It was Phil. "I'd like to address an issue of board appointment procedures," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. Karen tried to cut him off. "We can save that for the end, under miscellaneous." Phil raised his voice. "This is not miscellaneous. It's about how you got on the board. We never voted for you. There's no record of it. You've been acting as chair without a legal appointment for 2 years. That was the match." A murmur swept through the crowd. Karen's face flushed red, and she gripped the armrests of her chair so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I have documentation," I said, stepping forward. "No vote. No appointment minutes. And an audio recording of last week's private meeting where you threatened other board members and misused HOA funds for a personal event." Karen stood up. "That recording was obtained illegally. This is slander." I handed a flash drive to the HOA's legal advisor, who had apparently been called in last minute once things started heating up online. He plugged it into a laptop, clicked a few buttons, and played the audio through the room's old but functioning speaker system. Karen's voice echoed across the hall. Everyone heard her dismiss concerns, admit there was no vote, and call herself the board without approval. She sounded smug, entitled, and worst of all, completely exposed. A silence followed that clip. Not awkward. Heavy. Like the silence in a courtroom right before the judge brings the gavel down. Then someone clapped. Just one. Then another. And within seconds, the room broke into a scattered applause, not raucous, but satisfied. Karen tried to speak, but her voice cracked. I did what was best for the community, she said. Sometimes strong leadership requires bending rules. No, Rhonda shot back. Sometimes strong leadership means not thinking you're above everyone else. Another board member stood up. Marcia. She looked straight at Karen and said, I move to suspend Karen pending investigation into misuse of authority and HOA funds. I second, said Phil. All in favor? The legal advisor asked. Hands went up across the room. A sea of hands. Even one of Karen's supposed allies raised his hand slowly, like he couldn't believe he was doing it. Karen stood frozen, eyes wide, jaw clenched, trying to decide whether to scream or storm out. The vote passed. Karen was suspended. Effective immediately. But the story didn't end there. I went home and did what any normal person would do in 2025, I edited the footage and uploaded it. Title: HOA Karen gets exposed and voted out in front of entire neighborhood. I cut it perfectly, starting with her calling 911 on my Jeep, then jumping to her signs, her 4 a.m. rant, and finally the audio from the meeting. I included subtitles. I added a freeze frame of her face at the exact moment she realized she lost. It was brutal. It was honest. And it was kind of beautiful. By morning, the video had 30,000 views. By lunch, it hit 100,000. Comments exploded with stories from other people dealing with their own Karens. Memes were made. Reaction videos posted. Local news picked it up. Someone added dramatic piano music to the 911 call portion. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The HOA board, now minus Karen, released a public statement acknowledging the events, promising a full audit, and encouraging transparency. They actually thanked me for bringing it to light. I almost dropped my coffee reading that email. Meanwhile, Karen went quiet. Her Facebook profile disappeared. Her signs were gone. Her blinds stayed shut. People said she was still living in the house, but nobody saw her anymore. A few neighbors claimed she had tried to start a petition to reinstate her but only got 3 signatures, one of which was from a dog named Muffin. Then she tried one last trick. She filed a civil complaint against me for defamation, citing the video, the signs, and ongoing harassment that created emotional distress. I got the paperwork in a wrinkled envelope shoved in my mailbox. At first, I laughed. Then I called my lawyer. The court date was 3 weeks later. Small claims court. I showed up in a button-down shirt, holding a USB drive and a stack of neatly labeled folders. Karen showed up in a gray suit that looked like it had been worn one too many times to one too many zoning meetings. She brought a binder full of screenshots and a statement about her emotional damage. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who barely glanced at Karen's paperwork before asking for proof of defamation. Karen tried to spin a story. The judge interrupted twice to clarify that my Jeep was, in fact, parked on my own property and that the HOA confirmed Karen's suspension. Then I played the 911 call. The judge visibly sighed. "This is your complaint?" she asked Karen. Karen nodded. "Case dismissed," she said. "And Mr. Jenkins, while I can't say this on record, that sign was hilarious." Karen's mouth opened, but nothing came out. We walked out of that courtroom in opposite directions. She looked smaller. Not physically, but like her power had been sucked out, leaving behind only the shell of someone who couldn't control the game anymore. I got in my Jeep, rolled the windows down, and played a playlist labeled Victory Laps. First song was Eye of the Tiger. The war over the driveway was over. The Queen had been dethroned. And I had just proven, with a sign, a camera, and a little bit of determination, that even the loudest Karens in the land couldn't park on justice forever. 2 weeks after the courtroom smackdown, the neighborhood had finally exhaled. The tension that once made our street feel like a Cold War battlefield had evaporated. People were back to watering their lawns, walking their dogs, and waving again. Even the teenagers down the block stopped whispering like they were living under a surveillance regime. My Jeep sat exactly where it always did, majestic and unmoved, like a monument to petty perseverance. And for the first time in months, I felt a calmness I hadn't realized I'd been missing. The HOA, now free from Karen's iron grip, held a legitimate election to fill the vacant board seat. I didn't plan on running. Honestly, I was just happy to return to my quiet life of oversalted popcorn and weekend car waxing. But Rhonda, being Rhonda, nominated me anyway. And when I say she campaigned, I mean she went full PR manager. She made flyers with a cartoon Jeep smiling next to a lawn sign. She brought muffins to people's doors and gave out buttons that said "Keep it parked with Eric." By the time voting closed, it wasn't even close. I got 73% of the vote. Karen, despite not being a candidate, still managed to receive one write-in ballot, likely from herself. So now, technically, I was on the board. But I wasn't interested in wielding power. I wanted to fix what she broke. First thing we did was rewrite the HOA guidelines to be readable by actual humans. We removed the petty stuff, like lawn gnome height restrictions, and added new policies requiring transparency in all appointments and expenses. We even implemented a rotating community review panel so that no one person could hoard power like Karen had. Ted joined the finance committee. Rhonda chaired the events board. The whole thing started to feel less like a dictatorship and more like a neighborhood again. To celebrate, we hosted the first ever driveway freedom barbecue. It was Rhonda's idea, and it was beautiful chaos. We closed off the cul-de-sac, set up folding tables, lit grills, and even rented one of those inflatable bouncy houses for the kids. My Jeep was the unofficial mascot of the event. Someone tied balloons to its mirrors. A local bakery donated cupcakes shaped like tiny cars. Mark, the guy who made the Free the Driveway shirts, printed a banner that read "Park Proud, Park Loud," and hung it between two trees. People I barely knew came up and thanked me. Not just for the Jeep thing, but for standing up when most folks just rolled their eyes and hoped the drama would blow over. One older woman told me she hadn't sat outside her house in over a year because Karen used to scold her for inappropriate porch plants. I handed her a lemonade and told her to plant whatever made her happy. She gave me a hug and said, "That's exactly what I did yesterday." Then came the real cherry on top. Halfway through the event, a convoy of Jeeps rolled into the neighborhood, 5, maybe 6 of them, honking and waving flags. Apparently, one of them had seen the viral video and rallied local Jeep owners for a Park Where You Belong mini parade. They circled the block, parked in my driveway one by one, and took photos. It was absurd and awesome and strangely moving. I didn't even know half of them, but we all posed together like old war buddies. And Karen? She was nowhere to be seen. Her windows were still covered, her lawn overgrown, and her mailbox stuffed. Rumor had it she was planning to sell. The for sale sign appeared a few days later, slanted, rushed, and a little bitter in its presentation. One neighbor swore she saw Karen loading suitcases into her car with her jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. No one went over to say goodbye. No farewell dinners. No community send-off. Just silence and relief as her SUV disappeared down the road one final time. We thought that would be the last of her. But life has a sense of humor. A few weeks later, Rhonda called me laughing so hard she could barely breathe. "You won't believe this," she said between giggles. "Guess who just moved in next door to me?" I already knew before she said it. Karen. Apparently, she'd bought a home 2 neighborhoods over. Also HOA controlled. Also heavily structured. Also, hilariously, right next to the woman who'd helped dethrone her. Rhonda said the look on Karen's face when they made eye contact across the property line was something between a horror movie and a cartoon villain slipping on a banana peel. But this time, Rhonda wasn't alone. She already had friends on the board, she knew her rights, and more importantly, she knew exactly how Karen operated. "I've already got my binder ready," she told me with pride. "Let her try something. I dare her." Back in our own neighborhood, things finally settled. The Jeep stayed in the driveway, the signs came down, and peace returned with just the right amount of lingering sass. Every once in a while, someone would drive by, slow down, and point. I knew they were recognizing the house from the video. I didn't mind. It had become more than just a dumb HOA story. It was a little piece of resistance, a reminder that the loudest person isn't always the one with the power, and that sometimes, all it takes to stand up to a bully is a little wood, some red paint, and the ability to not move your car. The best part? Life didn't just go back to normal. It got better. People started talking more, waving more, helping each other out. The board meetings were no longer shouting matches but places where people actually discussed things. Kids played outside again. Lawn signs now advertised block parties instead of passive-aggressive threats. And I finally had the time to start that garden I'd been putting off since last spring. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the street in gold, I sat on my porch with a glass of lemonade, watching the shadows stretch across the driveway. My Jeep was right where it belonged. A few kids zoomed by on bikes. Someone across the street was grilling something that smelled incredible. Rhonda walked by with her dog and waved. Everything was quiet, peaceful, and just a little bit sweeter because I knew what it took to get here. It started with a knock. It ended with a sign. And somewhere in the middle, it became a reminder that sometimes the smallest hills, like a driveway, are absolutely worth defending.